You are listening to the Cookbook Love podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 317.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to October, a beautiful new month, and we will have 5 different episodes this month, and we have a lot of great interviews in store, fun cookbook authors for you to listen to, and I think I'm always amazed at all of these cookbook writers, how their journeys are so different. The people they are, of course, are so different, and the things that they talk about so different. And today was a lot of fun for me. I loved looking through this book, and I loved talking to our guest, which is Caitlin Prettyman. Caitlin is the creator and photographer behind the popular food blog Calefornia Kravings. Caitlin loves to share fun, vibrant recipes that are full of flavor and made with better for you ingredients. Being born and raised a San Diegan, she is mostly known for her easy-to-follow recipes utilizing fresh local ingredients found on the California coast. In our conversation today, we talk all about Caitlin's new book, Fast and Fresh Cal-Mex Cooking, that provides a fresh California spin on Tex-Mex cuisine using an array of nourishing vegetables, fresh herbs, citrus juice, zesty salsas, sauces, and healthy proteins. We also discuss Caitlin's publishing journey, her tips for writing a cookbook, and her advice for first-time cookbook writers. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Caitlin Prettyman. Hi, Caitlin. Welcome to the Cookbook Love podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So excited that you're here. Can't wait to share your book with everybody. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, definitely. So my name is Caitlin Prettyman. I'm the creator of California Kravings, which is a popular food blog where I share easy, simple to follow recipes that focus on good for you ingredients and really just are full of flavor. I also just wrote a cookbook, which we'll be talking about more on here, but I am so excited about it.
Yeah, I am too. And the name of your book, Fast and Fresh Cal-Mex Cooking, because you, from what I understand, were born in California.
Yes, I was.
Raised in California and still live in California.
Yes, all 3.
Yes, and that's what the book is all about, and the influence of, it's called Cal-Mex. So we're going to talk about ingredients and all the delicious recipes in the book. But why don't you tell us first a little bit about California Kravings and what that blog is and how you got your start being a blogger?
Yeah. So it just started more as a hobby originally. I was working as a catering sales manager for a restaurant, like one of our local restaurants. And I just needed something creative, like some creative outlet. And I started an Instagram first, and it just kind of took off from there. I was just posting recipes and, started gaining traction from it and really started realizing that my passion was food photography, which is what really got me into it. I took a food photography course that also taught you a little bit about business, bought my first camera, and it was all just kind of history from there. I quit my job, went into this full time, and it's been the best thing I ever could have done, honestly.
Amazing. When you started sharing recipes, what kinds of things were resonating with people?
A lot of my family recipes that I didn't think anyone would really care about, which I always thought was entertaining. But also I think just being in California, we have a lot of fresh food, and I'm a big salad person. So salads kind of became like my go-to recipe. Anytime I would post a salad recipe, it just got a ton of response to it. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Nice. And I think that the food photography part, it's amazing that you were able to take a course, learn about the business aspects of it, get your own camera. And I'm assuming if you did that, then you've took the photographs for your cookbook as well.
Yes, I did. That
Yes.
was also another pride and joy of mine.
Yeah, I thought the photos were very appealing and looked very good. And let's talk a little bit about then your journey from being a blogger into publishing. How did you get the idea to publish the cookbook, and what was your publishing journey like?
Yeah, so it's always been a dream of mine to publish a cookbook. I didn't really know at the time what that was going to look like. And I had been approached a few times before from publishers, but I just had no idea what I wanted to do. And they usually had, they had something they wanted, and they were just looking for for a writer. And then I had Page Street Publishing contact me, and they were just really interested in what I had to say, which was the first time that ever happened. And it really just let me kind of figure out, like, what am I really passionate about? And because obviously I live in California, Cal-Mex Cooking is really big here, and I had never really seen Cal-Mex book before. So I was like, you know what, we're gonna go with it. They were totally on board with it, and it happened. It worked.
Yeah, isn't it nice to have a publisher that really wants you to lean into what you know and love?
Yes. Oh, it's so true.
Yeah. So tell us what
Mhm.
Cal-Mex Cooking is.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with the term Tex-Mex. I feel like that can get like a little bit of a bad rep every now and then. But Cal-Mex, it's really big now. It's more of like a California and Mexican cuisine fusion, if you will. There's a bunch of restaurants popping up with it. It's basically you're taking traditional Mexican food and cuisine and just kind of putting a California spin on it, if you will, which is using the fresh food that we have, the local ingredients, sustainable food, if that makes sense. So just kind of like lightening up those more heavy traditional Mexican recipes, along with also just kind of putting a little Mexican flair on maybe like a coastal recipe, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just a lot of fusion going
Yeah.
on.
A lot of people often wondered then if they're going to dive into a book where a new type of cuisine or fusion cuisine is introduced, if they're going to have to like change their pantry and what they're going to have to buy. So talk us through some of the things in terms of what spices people might buy and the types of ingredients that people might use for Cal-Mex cooking.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about Cal-Mex cooking is that you really don't need any fancy ingredients. I'm sure most people probably have everything almost that they would need in their house already. A lot of the recipes include citrus, so like limes, lemons, even oranges. A lot of spices. It's very spice based. So that's your smoked paprika, your regular paprika, some cumin, chili powder, chipotle powder, even oregano. A lot of basic, I would call them basic ingredients that you would have, but you're just
Yeah.
using it in a way to get those Mexican flavors.
Yeah, I think those are all readily available in most supermarkets. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that makes it easy for people to be able to find these kinds of spices anywhere and know that
Hmm.
and it looked like from looking through the cookbook that most of the sauces and spices you put on meat and chicken and seafood and
Hmm.
shrimp and fish included just this list of those different spices.
Hmm. Yeah, those are my go-to spices, even just everyday cooking.
Yeah, yeah. And let's talk a little bit about the produce. You mentioned citrus, but also you have a certain type of mango in here. Tell us about the mango.
Yes, I always pronounce this wrong, so I'm sorry if I butcher it, but they are called Ataulfo mangoes. I want to say that's right, or honey mangoes. They're also
Yeah,
called mangoes too. That's what my
yeah,
supermarket calls
yeah,
them
yeah,
anyway. But they're basically smaller mangoes that taste a little bit sweeter, and they have more of like a smoother flesh to them. And I personally think it's a lot easier to find them when they're ripe too, because so many times I will go to the grocery store, pick out a mango, and it's either rock hard or it's mushy. Like it just there's no in between.
yeah,
So these mangoes are much easier for that aspect of
yeah.
it.
And then you also talk about cucumbers, cilantro, poblano peppers, and
Hmm.
of course, I saw avocado. And
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about chipotle peppers because that's something that people maybe don't realize. Most of the time, those just come in a can, correct?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about using them and what your recommendations are for the chipotle peppers.
Yeah, for the longest time, I was actually really nervous to use them because every dish I had before, like they're spicy. They are very spicy, and that's all I ever really knew them to be. But if you either you can use the chipotle pepper itself or just the sauce in the can. And if you use the sauce in the can, whatever recipe you're making will be a lot more mild than if you were to use a whole chili pepper with all of the seeds because all of those seeds in there make it a little spicy.
Yeah.
Or you can use the chili pepper and just remove the seeds too. So you have a lot of options as far as heat wise that go with it. And I do talk about that in the cookbook too, just so you can kind of make it more to your preference if you want.
Yeah. Now there's some surprising ingredients. Well, before we get to the surprising ingredients, let's talk about cheeses. You mentioned a couple different kinds of cheeses in the book.
Mhm. Cheese, yes. So my favorite cheese that I think I use for quite a few of the recipes is called cotija cheese. I don't know. A lot of people don't seem to be familiar with that, which I always found fascinating because it's everywhere in California. So I just thought that was a normal cheese people had. So I get that question all the time, actually, like, what does it taste like? What does it look like? It's kind of entertaining.
Yeah.
But it's a salty cheese. The thing I can relate it to most would be feta. So it's very crumbly, has a very strong flavor to it, but it's used in a lot of Mexican cooking. If you don't have cotija cheese, like I said, you can always use feta instead. Or there's also queso fresco, which you can use too, but it's a little more mild. So it's really just a personal preference on the cheeses aspect of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then what about you mentioned soy sauce?
Yeah, that's an interesting one that a lot of people don't necessarily know about. I think it's in carne asada actually it's traditionally used in carne asada marinades. But it's just another way that you can incorporate salt into a dish without actually having to use salt. A lot of people aren't aware of that, so that's another reason why I use it in the cookbook.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last one would be some vinegar.
Yes, vinegar is huge. All types of vinegar, especially that one I use mainly in sauces. So your chimichurri sauces, there's like an herb vinaigrette that I use it in, even some marinades. It's just really good to bring out those flavors and just give it like the big, bold flavor that traditional Mexican cooking is known for.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when I looked at the table of contents, I see you have chapters on tacos, tostadas, and more,
Hmm.
chicken, meaty mains, and then the catch of the day chapter includes different kinds of fish,
Hmm.
salmon. You also have a whole chapter on bowls and then
Yes.
a whole chapter on salads.
Yes.
So let's pick a couple of different chapters, ones that you know are like contain some fan favorite recipes, and talk a little bit about um, maybe some tips for that chapter and maybe a recipe that you think is really delicious.
Okay, let's see. I feel like you can't go wrong with tacos, so I got to start there.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, Tacos, let's see. What was the
Well, one of
what?
the ones that I saw that I thought was an interesting technique that you might want to talk about is when you made your tacos, you would bake the shells just for a little
Mhm,
bit in the oven, and then you'd pull them out, and then you would
mhm,
put some cheese on the shell, the filling,
mhm.
and fold it over and then re-bake it. And I think that was the black bean. No, no, no. Was it black bean
I
toast? No,
had
it wasn't that. It was the
the shrimp tacos.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Crispy
I was
shrimp and
actually
poblano tacos. Yeah.
I was going to bring that one up because that is by far my favorite taco, probably my favorite recipe in the book, actually. And it's been everyone who has made it has absolutely loved it. But they're a spin on a traditional Mexican dish called tacos gobernador, which is basically like, shrimp, poblano peppers, onions, and everything. But that version is usually fried in a lot of oil. So to get that crispy texture on the outside. So I just wanted to find a way to do that, but might be a little bit better for you.
Hmm.
So baking it was obviously, the way to go. But it's a lot better I personally think, than frying it because you don't get a lot of grease. It's really easy to do. You can make them in bulk, which is fantastic if you're having like a taco party or something, or even if you just have a big family.
Hmm.
Um, and you can use it with a variety of sizes of taco, like tortillas too. And it also works with flour tortillas, so you don't have to use corn tortillas either. But it's just a really good technique that we've started using with a lot of tacos lately.
Yeah, and again, you would warm them up and then put the
Yeah.
cheese, the shrimp topping, fold it over, and then you stick it back up in the oven and bake it, and then you topped it with the avocado cilantro sauce. It looks
Yes.
absolutely delicious, and I think that that's a technique for making a taco that people maybe aren't aware of. That these are the
Mhm.
kinds of things that this book offers are some different twists on things that people outside of the Cal-Mex cuisine area maybe would be really excited to try.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So another chapter that you really love.
Another one would probably be probably the meaty mains,
All
just because
right.
I'm a meat and potatoes kind of girl, so I had to put some meat dishes in there.
Yes. And what do you think is a recipe in there that people would really enjoy?
I would probably say the spice honey glazed pork chops with the peach salsa.
Yeah.
That
Tell us about
recipe
that.
that's been getting a lot of reviews lately. It's a really simply seasoned pork chop, which I feel like pork chops get no love at all. So this one is definitely a great recipe. But it's just simply seasoned with like I think it's cumin, paprika, salt, and pepper. You'll grill it for a few minutes. While it's grilling, you're also basting it with a spiced honey sauce that you just warm up in the microwave really fast, and then it gets topped with a fresh peach salsa to kind of bring out all of the sweet and smoky flavors. It's such a good recipe, and I think we made it like at least 5 times this summer already.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks really good. Really
Mm,
good. And
yeah.
I have to ask you about a recipe in the salad chapter that caught my attention. I thought it was a really neat twist is your Fiesta Caesar salad.
Yes. That one I have to attribute to my husband actually,
Yeah.
because he taught me how to make Caesar salad dressing from scratch with the anchovies and everything, which used to freak me out, but I'm over it
Yes.
now. But which actually, I guess, Caesar dressing was created in Mexico, so it technically didn't really need any tweaking, but for this book's purposes, I really wanted to just do something fun with it. So it's made with a cilantro lime Caesar dressing. So it still uses the anchovies, it still uses the egg yolk, all the things in traditional Caesar, but it's incorporating lime juice instead of lemon. We're adding cilantro to the dressing, and then also substituting cotija cheese for the Parmesan that's also in normal Caesar with tortilla strips. So you kind of just get a bunch of things in there.
Yeah, no, I love the addition of the tortilla strips, the addition of
Hmm.
the avocado, the way you put the cilantro and lime in the Caesar dressing, and of course the photograph is beautiful. It looks very appealing and it sounds
Thanks.
delicious. And I think that's something that I'm going to have to try. And I do have one more salad I have to talk about, and that's the kale. Hold on a minute. Is it kale corn? Oh, Mexican street corn kale salad.
Yes, you're picking all my favorite
I
recipes
know.
without
Well,
even knowing it. I love
all right,
it.
tell me about that salad.
That one is it was inspired by Mexican street corn. I don't know if you're familiar with Mexican street corn or okay,
Yeah,
some people.
tell us about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically corn. It's been grilled. It's usually slathered with mayo and has tahini and chili powder and lime juice and cotija cheese, and it's delicious. It's also a little not on the healthy side, I guess I would say. So I'm basically making or using all those flavors and putting it into a salad. I love kale salads. You don't have to use this with kale. You can use it with other lettuce if you want to instead. But it just features, you can grill the corn if you want, or boil the corn, however. It has corn, it has avocado, it has what else is there? Cotija cheese. I put cotija cheese in everything, I'm realizing. Some onion, and then it's all tossed in this creamy smoky chipotle lime dressing that just kind of puts it all together. So it has all the flavors, but you're just kind of having it in a different way. And if you're looking for something that's lightened up, this is perfect.
Yeah, sounds really good. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, in terms of your book and writing your book, there are people that listen to the show that are considering writing a cookbook of their own, or they're maybe on the publishing journey now. Tell us a little bit about what you recommend that they do in terms of their routines for
Mhm.
cooking, documenting things. What worked for you?
For me, I mean, I think when I first started, I underestimated just how much work goes into writing a cookbook. Because I was thinking I had all this time, and it catches up to you. So I think just if you already are with a publisher, just starting your recipe testing, starting writing, just starting everything as soon as possible. I think that's something that looking back, I wish I would have done a little bit sooner than I actually did. That and just learning to delegate things out. If you don't want to take your own pictures, delegate that out, or just kind of doing whatever you can to make it easier on you because the whole cookbook process in general, like it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And
A
how
lot of
long
work
did it
out.
take you from the time that Page Street reached out and you all settled on the topic, you signed a book
Mhm.
deal? How long did you have to turn the material in?
I think it was 6 months.
Yeah.
Which I mean, they told me 6 months. I was like, oh, piece of cake, I could do that. And then 3 months in, I was like, I can't do this. And they even told me too, like, start early. And I tried and I thought I did, but I wish I started earlier.
Yeah. So when you
Yeah.
say start earlier, what kinds of things should people pay attention to, like right off the bat?
I would get your recipes like solidified as soon as possible. And if you that means you're recipe testing 5 recipes a day or 10 recipes a day, like just do it. Just get it over with. And then you won't be scrambling at the end trying to come up with recipes if you have like a specific amount that you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I know that's something that I struggled with, because recipes they can be good, they can be bad, like
Right.
you don't know,
Right.
So that's definitely one thing that I would lock down as soon as possible.
Yeah. One question
Mhm.
that people often ask me is if they have a food blog and they're going to write a cookbook, can there be
Mhm.
any crossover of the recipes?
Yeah, I actually have 2 or 3 recipes that are crossovers, but I did have Page Street specifically tell me that they wanted brand new
Yeah.
recipes, which makes sense because, I mean, I know some people love flipping through a cookbook, but other people might not necessarily. They'll just go to your website. If they can get it for free, why are they
Right.
going to pay to have it kind of, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it makes sense, but I think if you could do some crossover, that definitely does help for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I've heard,
Mhm.
and it's funny, different publishers have different philosophies about that. I think, like,
Yeah.
some say, well, some people love the blog, but the book is like the physical thing they can take into the kitchen with them to make your
Mhm.
recipe. So it's kind of interesting how different, like I said, different publishers have different opinions
Oh,
about
yeah.
that. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
for you though, did you pick the 2 or 3 that were like very popular that you knew would be fan favorites for people to put in your book?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Actually, I think you mentioned 2 of them.
And what?
There was the Mexican street corn kale salad and the shrimp tacos
Yeah.
were 2 that were already on my blog that blew up and people loved, so
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
had to go in the book.
Yeah, no, that's great. And see, for someone like me who
Mhm.
wasn't familiar with you or your work until I learned about you from the PR agency, it
Mhm.
actually was great to have those recipes in there because I didn't know that they were favorites on your blog, but I liked the technique. I liked the ingredients that were in them, and I thought that they were very appealing. So I can see why they would have blown up on your blog because
Yeah.
they're very fresh sounding and the tacos, especially, like I said, a little bit different in terms of the technique for the way that they're made.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think too, if you have a book that doesn't necessarily feature all of your recipes, it kind of makes people, like you said, like if you've never heard of me,
right.
kind of like look at it and be like, oh, like now I can go to her website and see what else she might have out there
That's
too.
right. That's
That's
right.
definitely, like pros and cons.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, what about advice for people when it comes to their topics and what they like to write about?
I would definitely say to stick, if you have a specific topic that you're passionate about, and maybe some other publishers, kind of like I mentioned before, they had their own idea of what they wanted for a book, and it just wasn't jiving with me really. If you are really passionate about something, I would say just stick to it because someone out there is going to believe in you and someone out there is going to let you write what you're passionate about because this is going to take a lot of your time. And if you're not passionate about it, it's going to be really, really difficult
Yeah,
to do.
I
So,
always agree with that. I think like if someone had come to you and said, Caitlin, would you write a book about this or that? If it
mhm.
doesn't fit with who you are and what you love to do, it is
Yeah.
probably not the the project for you. The same for
Yeah.
brands. Like if a brand were to approach you and they would say, "Would
Mhm.
you work with this brand or use it in recipes?" If it's not something you typically use, it's hard to work it into, and act
Yeah.
excited about it.
It really is. And then you're just miserable the entire time, wishing you
Yeah.
didn't do
Yes,
it.
and I think that that's not the right energy to move forward with. So I'm glad
Mhm.
that Page Street was the type of publisher that wanted you to literally like write about what you're passionate about. I'm sure they get a better product in the end when that is the case.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was their whole spiel too,
Yeah, yeah, that's
which
great.
I totally believe in.
That's great. So tell us what's next and how you're working in the book and your blog. And I understand you had another change in your life recently.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So tell us about that.
So I just had a sweet baby girl about
Yes.
7 weeks ago, so still very much in the newborn phase. So just honestly, the whole work-life balance has been kind of crazy right now.
Yeah.
Normally I feel like I have it all together and everything is fine, and this has definitely been an eye-opening
Yeah.
experience.
And it's interesting that your book came out this year and the baby. I mean, you probably didn't know at the time that you signed the book deal that, I mean,
No. I mean, we
yes.
were trying, obviously, but it was more like, well, if it happens, it happens.
Yes.
But it
Yeah.
just happened to like coincide together. I'm like, well, this is what we're gonna do
That's
then.
right. Well, what a wonderful year that makes 2024 for you. And
Oh, yes.
I think that it's a beautiful book. I love to see you put forth your photography and your recipes. And I encourage everybody to look at Fast Fresh Cal-Mex Cooking. So why
Thank
don't
you.
you tell everybody a little bit about there's something about the book I didn't mention. I'm kind of backing up here a little bit, but there is a time limit to these recipes that we didn't talk about. And I think that that's important for people to know.
Yes. So all of these recipes can be made in 30 minutes or less. And
Yeah.
I recipe tested the heck out of all of these recipes to make sure they are 30 minutes or less.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look through the book, you think, oh, there's no way that's 30 minutes or less. But the fact
Mhm.
that you tested them, you ensure us that's the case, I think that it makes the book even that much more approachable. So I had
Yes.
forgotten to mention that earlier.
Totally
So,
fine.
in wrapping up, one thing I love to ask all of my guests is if you have a favorite cookbook and what that is.
My favorite cookbook would probably be the old Betty Crocker cookbook that my mom has. It's the baking edition too. I don't even know when it came out, how long she's had it. I don't know, but we have a tradition where every Thanksgiving and Christmas we get together and bake pies, and we always bake pies out of that cookbook. So every time anyone mentions the cookbook, that's just my first immediate thought is just baking with my mom. The pages are falling out of the book. There's notes written everywhere. Like it's just the best, but that would be mine, definitely.
Yeah. So, what time of year did you say that you all typically get together to make the pies?
Usually around Thanksgiving and
Oh,
Christmas.
yeah. So, you're going to do that
Mhm.
this year also?
Oh, we are with a brand new baby.
Yeah, I think that's one of those traditions, though, that it's hard to miss
Yeah.
from one year to the next. If it's something that you're used to doing, it's very
Mhm.
fun to do. And what a great book for pie recipes. So I'll link to the Betty Crocker cookbook in the show notes, several different editions, but I think that it's one that I suspect most people that are listening are familiar with. But just in
Mhm.
case there's someone that is listening that is not, I'll link to that in the show notes. Okay,
Perfect.
so why don't you tell us a little bit about how we can connect with you online then, Caitlin?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I have an Instagram account. It's California Cravings, and I also have my website, which is californiacravings.com. You can find all of my recipes there. And I also have a Pinterest if you are interested on Pinterest too. I have that, California Cravings. Everything's California Cravings.
Yes, very good. Well, we will link to that also in the show notes.
Perfect.
So I want to thank you for coming on the show. Wish you nothing but the best with the promotion of your book and with your expanding family. I hope that you enjoy the fall, the holiday season, and have fun baking your pies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.